here. All right. So like you said, we're talking today about building a personalized professional website, and we'll be answering these basic questions of why, what, and how to get it started. So I'm Megan. Razib kind of already introduced me, but I just wanted to add also kind of what interested me about this topic. Because when I moved to a new city, I moved to Nashville 3 years ago, and I didn't have any local professional network at all. But I knew I wanted to do freelance writing. I knew I wanted to do freelance communications. And I asked a friend who was doing freelance full time if she had some tips. And so she suggested having business cards made. She said, yeah, just put your name, phone number, email address, and your website on there. And she said that in such a way as if it were obvious that I would have a website, but I had never given that any thought before. So once I started thinking about it, I got really excited about that opportunity and what I was going to put on it, and the process from there was really fun. So I'm really excited to be talking about this tonight. Lee, was there anything you wanted to add about your introduction?
I mean, it already says I'm a technology enthusiast. I've been really interested in building websites at even a really young age. I started to teach myself how to code at 12 years old. And then I just kind of do, yes, I do a lot of website content creation and a little bit of design development, but I also do a lot of video. So I kind of am all over the place with digital media.
So our goals and objectives over the next half hour or so is, first of all, we just want to explain the value of having a personal website, not only for if you're job hunting, but other professional uses as well. We're going to offer a few best practices in terms of content and style for a website. And Lee's going to provide some basic technological tools so that you can get started building your website. So some of what I'll have to say is maybe might be intuitive, but the idea is that we just want you to walk away thinking intentionally about how you might approach building a website. So first question that we want to answer is why build a website? So now more than ever, that's kind of the catchphrase right now more than ever, a personal website is an introduction to who you are and what you might have to offer an employer or a colleague. It's more than a resume in that it gives you the space to show more of who you are and what you've done. And it allows for a lot more personalization than a LinkedIn profile typically would, which is especially important in creative fields. And then the nature of work in general is kind of trending so that this separation between work and life is blurred. And so it's becoming just as important for an employer to find someone who's a good personality fit as it is a good skill fit. And so a website gives you the opportunity to really show off that personality, especially in a time when you might only be interacting with your future employer via Zoom prior to starting a new job. It's really important to have a platform where your personality can shine. And so, yeah, that's kind of my first point, is to stand out to potential employers and potential collaborators. When I was on the hiring end, when I was working for the Cincinnati Symphony hiring for entry-level positions, I've certainly spent much more time considering applications where the candidate had a website listed on their resume. The second point I kind of already touched on, but yeah, who are you? What do you have to offer? It's more than just a fancy resume. And so this aspect of personality and personalization is maybe the most important thing about having a professional website. Third, it's a space to expand your portfolio. So in an interview, you might only have an opportunity to talk about 1 or 2 projects, but in a resume, you really only can tell about a project. And so on a website, you can show and tell about your projects, and it can be really comprehensive. And Lee is going to talk more about how important the show part of that is, especially on a website. So fourth is a place to direct people. Like I mentioned, my story about getting business cards, you want to be able to give people an easy place of, hey, for more information, visit da 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 da. And that also is going to make you findable via Google if you want. So just a few other pros and cons to mention. Some of the earlier seminars that Aragon hosted talked about the advantages of kind of building up your online profile for long-term career success. And so whether we like it or not, we all have an online presence. But having a personal website helps us to take control and manage that presence, and kind of control what that image looks like. So a drawback to having a personal website is it's a little bit more involved than a LinkedIn profile. It's a time investment, not only on the front end when you're building it, but down the line as you're maintaining it. So there is some work involved. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, when I was on the hiring end, when I had time to peruse someone's website, I felt like I knew that person better. I felt like they were more trustworthy. Whether or not that was true, I kind of felt like I could trust what they were saying. And so, and I just kind of walked away with a better idea of what their style and personality is. And then a couple of other pros is that the information that we'll be providing here is going to be useful if you're building a small business site too. And finally, along the way, you're going to learn other skills. So basic web design skills, content management skills, these are all going to be useful no matter what your career and no matter what your industry. So learning a few things along the way is never a bad thing. So now we're going to dive into the what portion of this presentation. So that what question is one that you need to ask yourself long before you get started building a professional website. So without an idea of what your own goals are for the website, any content that you post is going to seem haphazard and confusing for the user. So before you jump into building a website, you really need to give yourself the time and space to think about what you want to communicate, and what you want to communicate with your website. So are you trying to land a new position? Are you needing an informational platform for your colleagues for a collaborative project? So your industry will also dictate what's on your website. So if you're in healthcare, you might have a tab for clinical trial you're working on, links to journal articles that you're working on, an introduction to your research. But if you're a graphic designer, you might have a website that's really geared more towards your portfolio primarily. So I used an example here about this industry dictating content. William White's a musician, specifically he's a conductor. And so his website here has a biography. So if someone's maybe interested in if an orchestra is interested in hiring him, they might visit his biography, which is kind of an expanded resume portion. Will is also a composer. And so if he's working on a piece, his website is going to need to include a list of pieces he's written, probably some audio links, some download links so that people can perform his music. And finally, he's has a podcast called Ask a Maestro. So his website includes a portal that's, if you want to ask the maestro something to be included on the podcast, you have the opportunity to do that on his website as well. So if you're in finance, you probably don't need an Ask a Maestro section of your website, but you might need something else. And so you can see how the industry, that in his case being a musician, has really dictated what kind of content he includes. That said, there's going to be some basic information that is probably going to be useful and show up on most websites. First being an introduction. So that's something that should be short and sweet. Think of it as your own personal brand tagline. So you can see in this example, Catherine Monasterio is wording 9 to 5. So she's a writer. So she's wording. That's kind of her little shtick. And so she'll expand on that. You'll see she also has an about section, which is going to be a more like comprehensive biography. But in actuality, like what's on that front page, you want to make short and sweet and concise and to the point. So you really want to communicate that at the very beginning as to what you want to accomplish and achieve with your website. Next is the resume. So that might seem sort of self-explanatory, but you want to think carefully about how you present this, because you're not confined to your traditional 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper with this. So you want to think outside the box about how you want to present that information that would normally go on your resume. There's also opportunities to include a download link to a PDF of your resume. Just make sure if you do that, you're using a version of your resume that doesn't include personal contact information, because you don't necessarily want that on the internet. But having a PDF download of your resume is going to make it really handy for potential employers to pull that off. But again, your website should not just be a reproduction of your resume. If you've handed your resume to a potential employer in an interview and they go to your website and they just find your resume in an expanded format, then they will have wasted their time. Your website should really, the resume might be the core of your website, but you need that to blossom for the website to be a useful tool. And that gets us into the portfolio section. So again, depending on your industry, that's going to look different. But in this area, it's especially important to consider this visually. So depending on your field, it might be hard to present in a visual manner, or you might think it would be difficult to present your information visually. But again, just think outside the box. And Lee's going to give us some pointers in that department. But the idea here is that a portfolio isn't limited to graphic designers and photographers who have shiny pictures to show. You're going to think about charts and infographics, logos of clients you've worked for, charts that show how much revenue you're responsible for, logos of conferences where you presented, images of the cover of journal articles you've been published in, whatever it is. The idea here is you're really showing what you've done. And then finally, the mission vision section, that may not be an explicit page by itself on your website, but the idea is that somewhere, either through copy, or text, or visuals, the user walks away on kind of an understanding of what kind of employee you'll be. So every field has its own varieties of styles and approaches, and the mission vision section of your website is going to articulate what you hope to contribute to your field through your own career path. So here we kind of talked about, in the last slide, we talked about just kind of some basic things that are probably going to be on every website. And these are just a few details, a few ideas of things that might be good to include. The first is some sort of blog or personal touch. So a lot of people associate the word blog with these kind of, rambling recipe ideas or something like that. But the content of a blog can also be professional. So you can comment on some sort of facet of your industry, maybe write a response to an article related to your industry. You can use it as a reflection for a recent project. Personally, I find that having a blog is a really useful tool for myself to kind of reflect and learn from my experiences. So it doesn't necessarily have to be purely professional either. Again, this is a place where your personality is going to shine. So if you want to show some pictures of your garden or your weekend trip or whatever, you just don't want it to be so all over the place with your content that it feels like a Twitter feed, or it feels just kind of random. But maybe choose a couple of topics, maybe a professional topic and a personal topic. Choose something that's interesting to you and stick to that. And just kind of keep in mind too, there's a fine line between, allowing people to kind of peer through the blinds and peek through the window and bearing your soul to the whole world. And so you kind of think about this as water cooler conversation. This is whatever you would maybe kind of talk about to your pal in the break room, might be kind of a guide to think about what's appropriate blog content. Another important point here is frequency with the blog. You don't want to just write for the sake of writing, but you also don't want someone to come on your site and see that you haven't posted in 6 months, because then it looks as if you've abandoned the site. So choose a frequency for yourself. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's twice a month. I would say no less than once a month as a general rule of thumb, and just stick to that. And if at some point you decide that it's too much and you don't want to do it anymore, you can always delete it. And so it's better to omit it altogether than have something on your site that's clearly out of date. And then as far as social links, kind of the same rule of thumb. If you don't want your in-laws to see it, if you don't want your boss to see it, your next door neighbor, the CIA, don't post it on your personal website. And so, you know, you also don't want to be posting to your linking to your professional website, or linking to your Facebook page from your professional website if that's, you know, purely personal content that you wouldn't want a future employer to see. So use discretion when choosing whether or not to include your social media links. Likewise with your contact information, it probably just needs to be an email address. Yeah, I would say I wouldn't go beyond that because you don't want your personal contact information on the internet. So another thing that you might consider, depending on your industry, is potentially a news portion. You know, if you're working on a lot of things back to back, having some fresh news either on the front page or a page dedicated to news about what you're working on. If things are coming really quickly, again, that kind of goes in line with the blog. But you can kind of keep people updated as to like what's happening in your industry, or really quickly what projects you're working on, or if you have, you know, media articles, you know, or news articles that you can link to about your projects would be good as well. So now that we've talked about what kind of content to include on your website, in this part, we're going to talk about how to make that content look interesting, trustworthy, and look appealing. So I'm calling this curb appeal because if you've ever bought or sold a home, you know how important this is. If I'm searching for a home and there's 70 results on my list, I'm probably not going to click on the one on the left that has overgrown bushes, the chipped paint, missing shingles on the roof. It could be the perfect home for me on the inside, but I'm not going to click on it because it's not as beautiful as the one on the right. So the point is that you can't just throw content on your site and call it a day. Everything needs to have a purpose on your site. It needs to be clear what that purpose is to everyone who visits, and it needs to visually look nice. It needs to be aesthetically pleasing. So one way to achieve this is through a little bit of self-branding. If you're not a marketer, don't get nervous about this. Some people might find it helpful or even necessary to create their own logos or something like that, but it's certainly not necessary. The self-branding involves, you know, choosing a color palette, a simple color palette, choosing a font and sticking to it, 1 or 2 fonts. And it's about making yourself recognizable to the user. And that kind of leads into consistency. So what you need to be consistent in your style and your voice. So it's not only, you don't want to use 10 different colors, you want to use maybe 1 or 2 colors, but you also don't want to be all over the place in terms of formality. So if you're going to be formal, be formal. If you're going to be casual, but you don't want to go back and forth. Again, it's just better to make a decision about what your online style and brand is going to be. This goes back to the what question that we want to think about even before we start building. Think about what your brand is going to be and stick to that. And a way I like to think about this is, what's your character? Who's the character that you're trying to portray? And every aesthetic decision should play into that. But the main point about character that I wanted to talk about is that the personality that you're showing on your website needs to be authentic. It needs to be authentically you, because if it's not, it will be obvious to the user and it will come across negatively. And so this isn't about being bipolar and creating this fake online persona for yourself. You're trying to articulate a personality, but it has to be your personality. So the next point is, as you're choosing what kind of content you're posting and how you're posting it and how you're presenting it, you want to ask yourself, does this align with my website objective? And it's easy to get carried away and get excited and start posting pictures of your kids or your cats or whatever, but you really want to stick to the point of what you're trying to achieve with your website. So the next one is hard for me to visualize your content. This one's hard for me because I'm a writer. And so I communicate best with words, and I usually use too many of them myself, even in my writing. So, but my resume is already full of words. And so the internet is a visual place. So with your website, you really need to integrate imagery and show rather than tell what you're trying to communicate. So, few last points. You want to keep it simple, modern, clean. This goes back to that kind of self-branding. You want that brand to be really easy for people to look at. Templates are your friends. Stock photos are your friends. You're not cheating if you use templates and stock photos. But just remember that stock photos and clip art are not the same thing. So you want to stay away from those cheesy kind of animations or cheesy drawings, and stick to something sleek and nice. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lee to get on the technical side of things.
Hi, I'm gonna share my screen here in just a moment. Share screen. And awesome. Okay, great. So thanks, Megan. So as you can tell, there's a lot to plan for your website. So I just want to say, as you're getting started, definitely choose a Saturday or two, or maybe even 3, depending on how much content that you want to put into it. That's really up to you. But really 10 to 20 hours is pretty normal to be putting into the actual build of your website. And that's just, a small, website. That's not something that has, 50 to 100 pages like a business would, but something that's, 3, 4, 5 pages. Maybe it's only 2 at the very beginning. Maybe you put 10 hours in on a Saturday 1 month, and then 2 months later you put another 10 hours. That's all up to you. But there's definitely some investment of time here to make this something that is better than just a LinkedIn profile. So next, what you'll want to do is choose a site builder. I've listed the 3 most common, most popular ones out there. I imagine many people on this call have actually heard of these. I get ads for them all the time. Wix, Squarespace, and I don't have as many ads for WordPress, but WordPress.com has actually been around quite a long time. And I've actually used some form of WordPress for over 10 years. What's really great about these site builders is that they are geared toward people that aren't, making a profession out of building websites. These are for people that just need to show off their work, need to get, whatever communication they're trying to get out there about themselves, share their passion, share their interests, and it allows those, allows you who's building a website to focus on the actual content without having to worry too much about the technical details. One thing to know about WordPress.com is you may have heard there's also a WordPress.org, or when you Google it, you might find a WordPress.org. WordPress is a professional content management system, and you could very well go and purchase some hosting server space and install that WordPress.org, that system, and do all of the technical build out of a website yourself. That's totally fine, but just realize that's more technical hours you'll need to put in. There's just a lot more time. It's not a 10 to 20 hours. It's like 30 to 40. And you might want to have some, previous experience building websites, or at least editing websites. And there'll most likely be a lot more research. So for this one, I'm just focusing on what's, easy for most, new users, new website builders, and can fit for most people. Next, you want to choose a template, and I have an asterisk asterisk near that, because that could be dependent on what site builder you go with. They each have their own templates. I would absolutely encourage everyone, if you're looking to either one of them, to look at the templates on both of those websites before purchasing a plan, because you might like a certain template on one particular builder. But I would, if you're able to, I would get 2, 3, 4 favorites in line, spanning over the two, in case, unless you know exactly which one you want. And then I would collect visuals that represent the content that's going to be going into your website, collect your copy, and you'll want to purchase a domain. And that can be a little more complicated depending on what route you go. So I'm gonna continue on. So Wix, Squarespace, and WordPress. Wix and WordPress have a free option. So if you don't really have the budget for it right now, or you want to get started and you're not sure when you're going to publish and have it available for everyone to see, Wix and WordPress might be the best option for you, because you can get started without putting any money into it. That does not include a domain. I'll get to that in a moment. But if you do buy an annual pass or an annual plan, versus we have a month and an annual down here, an annual plan on any of these websites will include your domain. So the difference between Wix and Squarespace, for the most part, is that Wix has a very customizable, have many customizable design templates. So you choose a template and you can basically change any little part that you want. You can add buttons, you can change the font, you can change colors. And so if you know that you're going to see a template and you need to kind of tweak it to exactly what you want it to be, Wix might be your best option. Squarespace, the templates are very fixed. You are just changing images, you're just changing text. You're not even really changing sizes, but that might be better for you, because then there are less decisions to make. You're not going to go down the rabbit hole of trying to customize every little part. And that template is more likely to look exactly like it does in the finished section when you're browsing through templates. It may look a little more polished, depending on what your design background is, or if you get too focused on customizing every little thing on Wix. And then WordPress.com has, it's kind of like in the middle. So you have a header and a footer and a body, just like a letter, like when you're writing a letter. And that header and that footer is going to be exactly the same on every page. And it's going to be in the body that you'll have some flexibility on the template, and a little bit of flexibility as what you want to write and put in. Something that's really cool about WordPress.com is that it has a lot of plugins, because it's been around for a long time. And so you'll be able, if you're looking for features, functionality, WordPress.com may be the one you want to go with. But their plugins are on the higher end of their plans and more geared toward the business section. If you're trying to start a small business, that's where they have their plugins. So another reason to go with something so popular is that when you are starting to build your website, these services have the most documentation available. They have the most users, so they have the most complaints or the most issues, so that people are saying, how do I fix A? How do I fix B? And you can Google that, and you will actually find someone else has the same issue you're having, and you'll find the answer to that. And a lot of times it'll be on their own support pages if you run into issues. Wix and Squarespace, they have that support team. You're buying a support team when you go into these monthly plans or yearly plans, that when you do get stuck or you do have issues, there's someone to help fix those issues for you. So I talked about a domain just a little bit ago. This can be a little complicated, but I think for the most part, we understand what a domain is. It's that little alphanumeric name that points to your server where your website is. So google.com, amazon.com, target.com, those are domains. You can go to a domain registrar and purchase your own. You don't have to purchase it through through Wix or through Squarespace. It actually might be a little bit cheaper if you do, unless you get that, of course, that annual plan. But also, if you purchase a domain outside of one of those site building services, you own that domain outright. So if you decide to change your mind 6 months in, or even a year and a half in, it's going to be a lot easier to say, hey, I don't want my domain to point to Wix. I want it to point to Squarespace instead. And so you don't have, and that's actually going to be free. Whereas if you purchase a domain through Wix, you may have to pay some transfer fees to get it over into Squarespace. They don't have domain registrar services. They don't, um, it's not in their business model to allow people to buy domains and just point them wherever they want. That's not what they're looking to do. So again, if you want to use something like Namecheap, GoDaddy, Bluehost, um, there are a lot of other ones out there. But roughly for about $12 a year, give or take. I think Namecheap can be as low as $8 a year for that .com, that most common name. Yeah, this is definitely a route you can go. The only thing with this is that you'll have to do some domain mapping, a little bit of technical know-how, or you'll have to do some research if you've never done it before. It's really not that easy. I mean, really not that hard. But again, if you're not comfortable with doing all the tech on your own, definitely easier to say, here's the annual plan at Wix, or here's the annual plan at Squarespace, purchase your domain and never worry about it. So, okay, so how do you pick a template? As you're browsing templates, hopefully you figured out the what and the why. And so you can actually, as you're looking at each template, start to plan out where you want your content to go. You don't have to, start digging in like, oh, let me just open up a free account and start plugging things in. You could actually draw out some of your favorite templates and start planning on paper where that content should go. You don't have to write entire paragraphs. You don't even have to have the images quite yet available, but you can start to think about, oh, I want that to be a pie chart. Oh, I want that to be a picture of a calculator. And you can do that just on a piece of paper. It's a lot faster. I didn't use a ruler to draw this little wireframe, which is what they're called. I just did it very quickly, and I started writing things down. And so here's another, so this is just another page of that template. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, let me go back. And you can, so this is another version of it. You could draw, oh, there it is. There's my video. Just a little time lapse. Good. Really quick. But you see, I'm just drawing out very quickly, not putting too much detail, not using any rulers or anything, just to draw out the template very basically. And then from there, I can start, if I use a pencil instead of a pen, a pen's a lot easier to see on video, but if I use a pencil, I could start erasing those X's and actually writing what those words should be. And if I change my mind, I can just erase it and redo it without having to spend too much time, working around a builder you don't quite know yet. Okay. So what about visuals? I will show you some visual examples in just a moment, but I wanted to give this huge list of options that you have available. As you're planning your site, you have the what and the why, and now you have to think about, well, what does that look like? As Megan mentioned, stock photos are great. Screenshots are totally okay. That's fine. Think about the aesthetics of your personality. If you're, kind of casual, if you're formal, if you're a really earthy person, if you really like city nightlife, maybe you want to reflect that in your website. But there are things that can represent the work that you've done in the past visually, even though it might just be, several pages long. Maybe you have statistics, maybe you have tools of your trade, maybe you have images or like the end result of a project, you have an image of that. Did you work on a project that got some PR, public, some PR? You can use the logo of a news outlet and link to the article about the work that you were that you helped with, assisted with. Skill assessment, show what you know. Do like bar graph. Infographics are really great. You can get some free ones on Vise or Canva, which is what I've listed there. But just think of all the different, there are several different ways, and it might take some time, some brainstorming, but what do you see when you're working on your projects, on your work? And then Next, when you're collecting that copy, you might not be quite ready to write something right now, but just remember that, a lot of website copy is not very long. It's not pages long. It's a headline, maybe a subheadline, and a paragraph or two. And those paragraphs, a sentence looks a lot bigger and a lot longer on a website than it does on a Word document. Lorem ipsum is dummy copy. You can Google search lorem ipsum generator. It's the first thing on Google, and generate paragraphs and paragraphs of copy. So if you really want to see what does 10 paragraphs of copy look like on a certain page of your website, you could do that. And you'd probably decide that you don't want to do that anymore and that you only want like 3 sentences. But that's actually a good way to, play around with the content. You don't have to use, when you're building your template, you don't have to use exactly what you're going to use when you're first really planning things out or learning the system. You can just kind of get a feel for it, find your favorite photo of your favorite celebrity and put it up there and put it with a little bit of dummy copy and like, oh, I don't like that, or I do like that, before you actually start replacing it with the real thing. And LinkedIn copy that you've already written is totally fine to reuse. Just realize that, if, your employer or your potential employer is looking at your LinkedIn and they come to your website and see just LinkedIn copy, there's really no point in them going to your website. So your website should still be an expansion of what's already on your LinkedIn site. So here is just, again, some examples of visuals that you could use. Here's a timeline of a process. This is just makeup, but it could be anything, obviously. Maybe you had a really great sales year, pie charts. And I have some stock photos of like phones, casual shoes when you're trying to show off an aesthetic, calculator. Just think about all the different tools of the trade, again, from that list that you could use to visualize your content. So. All right, so what about images, where you get those images, and are they good quality? I get a lot of images through my job where like, hey, can you put this image on a website? And it's way too small. It actually even happened this week. That's why I have this 128 pixel square. That's actually a very small image. It's a low res image. So taking like an Instagram photo and trying to blow it up and make it look like really big, taking up a full page of a website is probably not going to work. Those are not that high res. And so what happens is you get this over pixelation, or it's, if it's trying to fit a square into a very wide rectangle, what happens is we squish the image down. You don't want that to happen either, because obviously everybody looks quite a bit warped, and we don't want that to happen. So keep in mind that you want to have higher resolution. I try to go with about 1,000 pixel width at least, if not higher, if possible. And just like WordPress.com definitely has a photo editor in it. These site builders have photo editors inside them, but there's also Canva. Again, they have a free option and a pro option that allow you to do some photo editing, where you can do some cropping. You can do some, scaling up and down. I generally don't try to scale any images that far up. You can always have a much larger image and go down, but you're going to lose quality when you have a small image and go up. That's where you just don't have the information there to make it look that great. So with this image, the square image, to make it fit into a little rectangle rather than trying to squish it in, this is where you have like, you crop it, you make it so that it, yeah, I've cut out her hands, but they're really not that important. Their faces are the most important. And so that's what I've done there to make it look right. Okay. So before we get toward the end, we're getting toward the end, I just want to show some not so great website examples and again, some good website examples. Here is a church website. It's not the worst, but we do have a lot of gradients that kind of make it look like we have several different colors. Gradients have technically 2 colors, sometimes 3, because they're going one into the other. And so it's just, it's a mixture of colors. They don't necessarily go together. Unfortunately, this gold can kind of make something look a little more dated. It's a little, like that really fake gold. It's that same effect. This blue gradient here, yeah, it is highlighting the words. It's definitely easier to read the word worship aid because it's a white background behind it and not the blue. But there's these gradients just remind me a little more of like 2005 and it is 2021. So, the design of your website will, if it doesn't look sleek or modern, which a lot of these site builders, their templates are sleek and they are modern. They give you kind of that edge and that curb appeal that Megan was talking about without having to work too hard for it. You don't have to worry about dating yourself. You have something flat. Yes, is it a little flashy? Yeah, but we all, like we'll purchase something at the grocery store that has flashier packaging on it. We all have, we catch our eye with something that's really bright blue or something that just looks really great. That stuff does matter. What your website looks like does matter, and it can give it the effect of if you are a legitimate source of information that you care about what you're doing, or you don't really have too much attention to detail. So this next not so great example, this is definitely better. There are less colors. It's cleaner. It's just a little, again, this is a little more outdated. So there's a lot of text on this particular site. Again, the gradients, the buttons across the top are something I haven't really seen too much in the last 5 or 6 years. Usually a menu is more toward the top left corner or the top right corner, and we'll get into why in a moment. And the font doesn't look that great either. It kind of looks like this looks like a button I created in Photoshop rather than and this is very, very technical, but a lot of modern websites, you're actually creating buttons by the code versus like a little image that you click on. So there are just some things that I know why they don't look that great. But it's just kind of it conveys when the website was made, and it shows that it's dated. We see how things look today when we look at a website, a brand new website. We look at Facebook, we look at Amazon, we look at CNN, and everything's sleek and cool. And so that matters. It does affect how we look at everything. So this is a good website. This is actually one of the vendors we use at the CSO. But if you notice, they only have 2 colors here, really. And it's very minimal content, which actually I think is, it can be harder or easier depending on what kind of writer you are. But they just have a couple lines, just a couple sentences. They have their logo, they have their menu up at the top. We know how to get to it, and they have one big image. Again, this is actually a film. They produce video, so of course that makes sense. But it's very clean. It's very straight to the point. We don't have a bunch of things to click on. We know where our eye is supposed to draw to. It's supposed to draw to the center of the page. So I'm going to click on this and actually show you. So this is the mobile version of their website. Again, same colors, same content. It's just been made to fit on a cell phone, on a mobile device. And so that's also very important. A website like this one on the left is definitely not mobile friendly. When you go to put it on a mobile device, it's not going to respond. It's actually called responsive design. It's not going to respond to the constraints of your phone. Drive Media House's website actually does. And that makes it a lot easier so that you're designing one website, but it's looking great on both of them. So how do you do that? So all of these site builders actually have templates that work on both desktop and mobile devices. And the biggest reason why that's important is because you have to think about who's hitting your website and when. Is it an HR representative who's scrolling through resumes and they're at their desk at their work and they're going through desktop and they're seeing your website? Or is it your actual future boss and they're just going through resumes on their phone and their email and they're clicking on links that their HR person sent them and they're looking at your website on the phone, right? Or someone's looking to hire you, they're on their couch late at night and they're trying to solve an issue or solve a problem. They're Googling things, they're looking into their LinkedIn app, they're clicking on your website from LinkedIn, they're looking at it on their phone. So all of these are important. It's actually pretty easy when you're looking at I was supposed to only do the one, I'm sorry. But if you click on this at the top on this little mobile device icon, it'll show you templates in their mobile form. So all of these site builders will allow you to design a website in a mobile and desktop format, and they're just both equally as important to look really good. So last but not least, just some, last pointers for when you do get into your website building. Time wasters, if you have photos that you're wrestling with photos that are way too big or way too small. So if you get like a photo can be too large, it could be several gigabytes if it's like a raw photo. You are going to need to compress that down. You don't want to have a photo on your website that's 500 megabytes and it takes 2 hours to download. So you want to make sure you have really good sources for your visual content. Usually anything that you're creating online is going to compress itself, but of course Photoshop has a compressor inside of it as well if you have that experience. Forcing too little or too much content into the wrong template. If you write too much and you only have space for 2 sentences, that's gonna waste your time. You're gonna have to spend time editing down. So try to think about the space you actually have in your template and write for that section. And then getting down the rabbit hole of customizing everything. Not all of those site builders will allow you to do that, but if you're trying to change every word, every color, one is going to take a long time and it might not look that great. It won't look that consistent if we have different font sizes and different fonts and different colors all over the place. You're going to probably want to start over because it might be easier just to do that, and then you wasted a lot of time. But if you decide as you're doing this you want to start over at some point, that's okay too. I just hope that you learn something. That's fine. Then, so last but not least, but when do you update a website? You can always proof and delete content that you may not want to have out there anymore. 5 to 10 minutes. Obviously, if you have a blog that is updating or adding content, or if you have a project that you just got done at work and you want to add that, or you're a freelancer and you're really proud of something and you want to promote that and add that, that can take some time. You have to make a screenshot, you have to make a photo, you have to write a little bit of copy. Just plan for it. Just say, hey, you know what, Friday night or Thursday night, I'm going to get on my website and I'm going to add this or update this. Yeah. All right. That's it. I'm going to stop. I guess stop sharing, or we have questions. Okay, there we go.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Megan. It was really very informative, and I think I personally took a lot out of this. So thank you very much. So now I leave. So I open the floor for any question. So feel free to write your question in the chat, and Megan and Lee will answer. So so there was one question. So the person who asked us, in using images on the site, how can you compress them so the website page still uploads quickly while keeping the quality still good?
So yeah, a lot of these. So I know WordPress definitely. When you actually upload an image on WordPress, and that's just the one that I've actually built websites with before. I did some digging with Wix and Squarespace, but they actually have built-in compressors, so they'll actually reduce the size of your image for you in their photo editor, which is really nice. But there's also Photoshop that has like, if you go like File, Export, Save to Web, you can actually compress your photo even further if you have access to that. So.
Okay, that's Photoshop is always a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
Any other question? Okay, so let's see. So okay, while people well, we'll give them some chance. Oh, okay, there's some questions. How original do you need to be? Do you need to be careful of copying other website? I'm not sure I understand. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you should write your own copy and you should use your own images. Or if you're using stock photos, something like Pixabay is free, and so they have a lot of free photos on there you're free to use, or you're maybe paying for stock photos. And so those you have permission to use. If you're going on a website and literally copying and pasting images, copy, that's no, don't do that. Also, it'll ding you on Google. So Google doesn't want to see a bunch of duplicate websites. It's going to say, oh, this is a fake website. This other website that's been around for so much longer is more of a legit, company, and this is someone just copying and trying to maybe steal their identity, or that whole that idea. So definitely try to be original in your actual content. Can you be inspired? Hey, that person used a picture of a laptop. Just go find another picture of a laptop. Just don't, one that you can have, a stock photo of a laptop. It's fine. Just don't use the same one. So.
Yeah, I would just add originality is important. I stress that a lot in with the point about personalization. But that said, I don't think there's any pressure to feel like you have to take a template and make it into something else. If when you're done inserting all your content and your original text and your original photos, or your own stock photos, that then you can leave it like that. And if it still looks like the template, that's okay too. Like Lee said, you don't have to customize everything. In fact, you probably shouldn't, because unless you're really prepared to dedicate some time to it. So yeah, as copyright, in terms of copyright issues, yeah, that's obviously really important, but there's no need to be concerned about over customization.
So another question is, you mentioned not including personal contact info beyond email. Any other privacy concerns that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I'll address the first part of that question in terms of contact information. Yeah, I would say if privacy concerns, you would want to probably use the same, or even more. Let me start over. So when you think about your social media and what you're posting on your social media, you're obviously very conscious about who's seeing that. The difference here is that social media is usually, you're protected in the sense of, only your friends can see it or something like that. This is open to everybody. The website really is open to everybody. If someone Googles your name, it's going to come up. And so anything that goes on your website, you really need to be attentive to. If you're running a small business and you're using and you're running payments through your website, that's a whole other thing in terms of privacy, and Lee can probably speak more to that. But and these website builders will help you through that. So if you're running transaction on your website, Wix and Squarespace have answers for you in terms of that. But in terms of contact information, yeah, personally, I would not want anything other than my email address. And even then, I would not want it something clickable. I would want to do it in such a way that it doesn't hyperlink automatically on the page itself. Lee, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think something to kind of keep in mind that I always remember is that, you have a lot of robot crawlers on the internet. And if you have your contact information out there, they're just reading websites and they're collecting all that information and they're sending it out somewhere, or they're selling it, or who knows. And so that's why you don't want your email address to be clickable. You don't want it to be that, a little code can come through to your website and basically start sending you spam email, or, and then same with your phone number. I mean, that really depends on, I think, if you have a lot of clients, if you're trying to get people to call you, contact you, it's kind of your preference. But, if you're a little more private, I would not put your phone number out there. You could also get something like a Google phone number if you want to really kind of hide. I have not done that myself, but that would be a way to kind of separate your own personal phone number from a business phone number. Yeah.
Okay, so last question. Are there freelancers who can actually, who somebody can hire to do this website building? Because some people may be busy, they may not have enough time to actually build a website from scratch, especially for either for their organization or for their personal purpose. So do you know any kind of any ways to find those freelancers who can help you build those websites for you?
I mean, no, that's a good question. I think a lot of freelancers for web design are going to be much more on that professional side. So they're not going to be dealing too much with Wix or Squarespace. So they might be a little pricier than you want them to be. I've not come across any particularly like specifically like I guess these are almost like consumer websites. And if it, this is like front end, this is for someone who's not really doing it for a profession. So it might be a little pricier than you may think. Of course, there are always students that might be trying to get their leg in the door or foot in the door. But yeah, just it might be a little bit pricier than you imagine.
Yeah, I was thinking also students are good. If someone who's maybe studying to do web design or something like that could use the experience. Also with this question, it says that the lab website is hosted on the university platform. So it might be a question for the university as well, because whoever you did hire to do that project would need some sort of access to, I'm guessing, the university servers, if that's where it's hosted. But that said, there are certainly freelancers out there. I don't know of any specific platform to find them, aside from something like LinkedIn or something like that. But that's a good question.
Okay. So I think we have actually extended our hour. So thank you very much, Megan and Lee. It was really wonderful to have both of you give us a very good overview of how to go about building our own personal website. So these sessions are, this is recorded. So if you missed out anything, then you can always go to our Ergon YouTube page and we'll upload it shortly, and we'll notify you when it's uploaded via email. So thank you once again. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our next Ergon seminar. So with that, I'd like to thank again Megan and Lee. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And everybody have a good night. Take care. Bye.